that you made to join us. And like you know, people are still joining, and we will give them 1 or 2 minutes to come to the session so we can start. But in the meantime, if you have joined, feel free to put in the chat your name and where you're joining us from, and we'll have another activity to help us get to know each other well. Okay, so this is our Prevention Essentials facilitated course. You might have seen that we have another one that is self-paced, but you and so many colleagues of yours managed to be eligible to take this one. This is a facilitated course.
Okay.
We appreciate the baby. Hi, everyone. I know we're working from home and then we may hear sound, so bear with those who are working and doing multiple roles at the same time. So if you can stay muted, we will really appreciate that. So like I was saying, the Prevention Collaborative is really thrilled to welcome you all to this cohort 5 of this course, the Prevention Essential, the latest of what, how, and why of prevention. So I feel like, very excited to learn from all of you, and me and my colleagues who are going to introduce ourselves are really looking forward to learning from everyone. We know you are coming with such a wealth of experience. We are here to provide a co-learning space and to value everyone's experience in this field of violence prevention. So we have a good number of colleagues who joined already, and thank you for those who are introducing themselves in the chat box. I'm going quickly to introduce the team of facilitators. Those who are here will introduce themselves. We have the next slides that shows, Manon, that shows the pictures, but I'm sure you have met us through the Learning Lab, the Prevention Collaborative website, so you can know more about us. But for the sake of those who may have missed the opportunity to meet us on those platforms, I'm going to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Rita Nyiratunga. I'm based in Rwanda, Kigali as a city, and that is in Africa, for those who are not maybe very familiar with that small country. I am with the Prevention Collaborative as a senior associate, capacity development, and I've been in the field of violence prevention for more than 11 years now, and I'm really happy to meet all of you, learn with you, and this is gonna be, for me, a good learning journey. So I'll hand over to my colleagues here to introduce themselves very quickly. I know you have Rubina that you see here. She's not here today, but I'm with Benita and Manon. Kindly introduce yourself, Benita.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Benita Shrestha. I'm based in Kathmandu, Nepal. I'm also part of Prevention Collaborative team and will be one of your facilitators for this course. Also, would like to mention that I am very, very glad to be part of this course. And as Rita said, I'm looking forward to learning with all of you. Over to you, Manon.
Hi everyone, I'm Manon. I'm the program assistant for the Prevention Collaborative. So I'll be assisting everything that has to do with tech support during these 2 first weeks. And I'm joining it from France, actually, today, where it's quite sunny. It's quite nice for February's month.
Great, thank you so much. And colleagues, really apologies that we cannot have a quick round of introductions for the sake of time. But what we want to do to give everyone the opportunity to start getting to know each other. There is a link that I just put in the chat box that we would like everyone to open, go to that link. And then this is an activity that will help us know where we are joining from, know each other, because we'll see names, we'll see where people are joining us from. Please go ahead and click on the link Yes, Sylvia and everyone, and let us know if the link can be accessible to you. Open the link, join there. You'll find name tags. I know we have people from all over the world, and we are really, really happy that you are all joining from different parts of the world. We look forward to hearing from your different contexts. What is your experience? Kindly find your name tag. We just ask that you adjust it, meaning if we've misspelled it by any mistake, if you want to be referred to, as someone else on this course, please adjust it and add a city or a town. So we just put in the countries, but if you have a specific city that you'd like to add to your name tag, that will be wonderful. That is a way of trying to, starting to get to know each other, who is joining and where they are joining from. Okay. So we'll take 1 or 2 minutes to go to the link, find our name tags, and please scroll down because we have different slides according to where we're joining from. We have many people from Africa. We're acknowledging your presence. If you're joining from Nigeria, Cameroon, Eswatini, Zambia, Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, Rwanda, South Africa. We also have people who are joining us from Asia and Asia Pacific. We welcome you all. And I can see colleagues are already filling in. And we also have people who are joining from Europe. Very warm welcome, Maria Cara, Shan. And we also have someone who joined from Latin America. Yes, Maria Concepcion. Are you there? If you are here, I'd like you to give a thumb up, and we really appreciate you are representing the whole continent there. Thank you. Yeah. You can see that we have a color, like it's multicolored. This is, it means we'll have a multiple kind of, perspectives. We'll have different cultures represented here, and we really appreciate. That's why I was saying this is gonna be a co-learning space. So feel open to learning from each other, right? Okay, and this activity you can carry on completing where you're joining us from. For the sake of time, if we can go back to the session and then continue with the activity and also introduce the session of today. Is everyone okay? Is there anyone who had trouble accessing the link? Please write in the chat box so we can assist. Great. Okay, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the session that we have today. Of course, we've started with the introductions and we'll continue. We'll have another activity that will take us into deeper introductions so you can know your colleagues. I will briefly give the course overview. Now, this is an overview of the session, but I'll also talk about the course overview so you get to know what is in the course. And then today, the opening session, as you must know now, because we posted it, we're going to talk about violence against women. And my colleague Benita will take us through what it is, why is it important to do a violence against women programming. We talk about the forms of violence, types of data, and everything that we need to know related to that. And we'll specifically talk about intimate partner violence, right? And we'll also have an interactive group work. And we'll talk about why we think it's important to have this group work. And we'll not stop saying that we believe in everyone's experience, knowledge, and we want to provide the opportunity to share. That's why we'll do the group work. And just to introduce this to you, and I'll talk about it later, we will have take-home exercise. Those are simple exercises. I'll get to talk about those later. This is like our closing activity. We send you with an exercise that we will do each and every week. Simple ones. Okay? So on the next slide, we're going to talk about how the course will work. So before we even go into how the course will work, the main thing to know is to be able to navigate the platform easily. So I wanted to hand over to my colleague Manon, who is, like she introduced herself, our tech savvy person, and she's going to give you a quick tour of the Learning Lab. Some of you may be familiar with that, but for the sake of those who are not very familiar, please, Manon, I'll give you the floor to give us that quick tour. Okay.
Thanks, Rita. Hi, everyone. For the one that joined us later, I'm Manon, and I'll be supporting IT-wise and tech-wise. If you have any issue, just email me, and I'll do my best to support. Just a quick recap of the Learning Lab, which is a learning platform, which has everything that you need to follow this course. So first of all, this is like the address. This is also what we shared, Rita kindly shared in the email previously. And sorry, my computer is a bit slow this morning. And so this is the main page of the Learning Lab. Please note that I'm already logged in. If I was not logged in, you would have the option logged in at the top right of the screen. But because I'm already logged in, as you can see, I have the option home, my account, discussion forum, and logout. Okay, sorry, my computer is very slow. So if I click on my account, as you can see, so I have a profile picture and a name. You can edit this by clicking on edit profile. This is always useful, especially to interact on the discussion forum, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But so if you go into my account, you should be enrolled into Prevention Essential Cohort 5. If you're not, please email us and we'll correct that swiftly. And so this is the course landing page. And if you scroll down, you can see that you have all the different course content. So right now, there is only the welcome session, session 1, that have been published for you to access. And so if you go and click onto those sessions, as you can see, this is like the learning platform. So you're going to have the different topics. I think, Rita, you already mentioned a little bit in the email the pre-course work. So some of you might have done it and already met Mercy's and view Mercy's story. So as you can see, it's already mentioned here, you can click on discussion board, and this will give you access to the course discussion board. I can see that Cameron, you already posted on it. Right now, the first post, it was about welcome and introducing yourself. So if you go on the course, hi everyone, nice to meet you. And after I've written my message, I click on submit. You can edit, if you want to further edit, you can edit the post afterwards. We will be posting every week, kind of like the topic that we discussed about, so that you have time to exchange and talk about your own experience with other practitioners. The main thing to know as well is so that for each session, you always will have 4 different topics. The first one is the virtual workshop. If you go here, this is where, so I need to change that. Sorry about that. As we said, there was a confusion in the password, but this is where you're going to have all the different key message and the link, password, time for the virtual workshop and live session every week. After the session, it's usually between 1 and 2 days after we upload the recording of the session, so you can access it again in your own time. And then, Rita, I don't want to get too much ahead of myself, but we'll talk a bit more about the take-home exercise, but this is also where This is also where you can access the take-home exercise that Rita and Benita will introduce in a little bit. And we also tend to upload some further resources for people and participants that want to go further after the course.
Great.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Manon. Hello. Thank you so much, Manon, for the quick tour of the Learning Lab. And we know, again, this is not like a full tutorial, but if you have any trouble, like she said, she's the go-to person and she'll be able to support with any issue you have. And also feel free to email us, Benita, myself, as the co-facilitators, but also we have a whole team behind the scene and you'll be seeing some of them joining some of the sessions, right? Please do not hesitate. Now, I'm going to talk about the take-home exercise as a big part of this course. So you will be submitting a take-home activity or exercise, like whatever you call it. But this is a very important thing that we want people to take the content, the learning, whatever we discussed in the course, to go back and reflect deeper about that, share with some colleagues or friends, and come back with their reflections for deepening the learning that we are trying to promote here. So each week, like Manon just said, and I said earlier, we'll be giving a take-home activity that you will be asked to complete by the Sunday. Because we need to review and give you feedback and let you know whether your take-home fulfills the requirements, whether you need to adjust something and redo the take-home, and we'll be guiding you into that. So one main important thing to note here is you'll be submitting your take-home to this email address, learninglab@prevent-collaborative.org, and you will need the subject, for the sake of us being organized and retrieving your take-home very easily, would like you to put in the subject take-home exercise and say, because we've got many cohorts. So you mentioned cohort 5, PE, Prevention Essentials, cohort 5, and then you say session number. So the session number means which session the exercise was given in, all right? Like today, if we give the exercise, the take-home exercise, you'll be saying take-home exercise, PE or Prevention Essentials, cohort 5, session number 1, all right? So we can find it, review, and get back to you, okay? We really value this co-learning, and we'll give opportunities to colleagues of yours, some of your colleagues, to be sharing during the main sessions, what they wrote, what they did as the take-home exercise. Okay, and in the meantime, if you have any question, please put it in the chat box and we'll be addressing it as we go. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the course certification. So like you may have seen, we are giving certificates at the end of the course. Okay, but the certificates for us, I mean, you need to fulfill a number of requirements to be able to get the certificate. Okay, we want to be testifying that you learned with us, and the Prevention Collaborative will give you a certificate. So now, what do you need to know? You need to have attended at least 4 out of the 6 sessions. You all know that we have 6 sessions for this course, and we would require you to attend at least 4 sessions out of the 6, okay? We also want you to be able to complete successfully 4 of the take-home exercises at the level that is at least, you know, meeting the requirement, okay? Some of you really do the take-home activities, exercises, and they really write very interesting stuff. That's why we want to be giving the colleagues to share, okay? So another thing that is important, because there is no way we can track your attendance to this session if we don't give you opportunity to mark your attendance. So right now, I'm putting in the chat a link. Let me just check, a link, the attendance. So if you see this link, go ahead and open it and already mark your attendance to session 1. So you'll be able to see where session 1 is, and all you need to know is to tick a box in front of your name. And that will help us track attendance to the different to the different sessions. So I can see that someone, is it Lan? Lan, if you're having trouble, Manon, Benita, if he has a specific problem, maybe you can assist. Okay. So can you please just give one click to that link to confirm with us whether you can edit, because it's important that we know you are able to access the link and sign your presence. Just a thumb up to say whether you've been able to access it. If you haven't, okay, so it's editable. Thanks for confirming, McDonald. That's important for us to know. Thank you so much. Manu can also access it. So it's open for everyone to complete. So very quickly, like I said, we gave the overview of the session, but here's just to give you a picture of how the course will be, how many sessions we'll have. So today we're doing session 1. And again, this tends to be the longest session because it's at the beginning, and we really will be thankful if you bear with us if we go beyond the 2 hours, because each session is 2 hours, usually, like you noted, but for the intros and everything that we have to give at the first session, it may be longer. So session 1, it's introduction and nature of violence against women. The next session will be next Wednesday. So someone was asking me, when is the course going to be, is it a one-off? Is it 1 week? But I said it's once a week. If you haven't read carefully, it's once a week, same time on Wednesdays. These are 2-hour sessions. So next Wednesday, we'll see the what and why of prevention, and then we have another session on prevention principles, looking into what are the principles do we have to consider as we do programming against violence against women. And then we'll go into the session 4, understanding causes of violence against women, of course, to find solutions. Okay, we'll go together through that, try to understand what are the causes of violence in order for us to see what can be the appropriate solutions to curbing or to ending violence against women. So, and we know that needs some strategies. We know that we need to know how to program properly. So that's why the following session, session 5, will take us through the prevention strategies. We learn from strategies that have worked in other places. We are informed by evidence in everything that we'll be sharing here, what has been proven to be working, and we'll be sharing with you, okay? And the last session will be like looking ahead. So now we've known all this, we've understood the reasons why we need to do prevention and what is next. If we look ahead, what are we seeing new in our context, and so on and so forth. So we will get an opportunity to be learning together in the 6 sessions. Very quickly, if you happen to miss a session, unfortunately, we cannot mark your presence, but at least you'll catch up with the recording, and we are here to assist if you need any additional explanation, if you need additional resources. So do not hesitate. You have our emails, and reach out, okay? Okay, so still on the course overview, we're going to talk about, on the next slide, we'll talk about our group agreement. This is a big group, okay? We really know that the virtual kind of world today is really invaded by courses, meetings, and other things. But we also know that in order to be effective, as we use the virtual context, we need to have some agreement, all right? So I'd really want to know what for you will make a good learning and sharing environment. We always say it's learning and sharing. Please put in the chat what has helped you to feel like this is a good learning environment, and I learn and I get to share. Yeah, so I'll be waiting to see what you write. And then, like I said, this is cohort number 5. We'll be also, yes, we'll be sharing what other people said. Yes, Susmita, thank you. To be patient, to be good listener, very important. Be a listener. Okay, so we're going to send to you the link again. Zira Allen, we're going to send the link. I'm gonna put it in the chat for your attendance. Yeah, I was acknowledging that there are good answers in the chat to be active participants. Very important. So if we came here and no one was talking, it wouldn't be a good learning and sharing. That's why we call it sharing. We value your expertise, the wealth of knowledge that you're bringing in here. So we need to be giving each and everyone opportunity to share freely. Thank you so much for adding that. Share freely and equally, keeping in mind how much I have or haven't spoken already. That's very important. Thank you so much all. And yeah, we tend to have the same agreement whenever we have a cohort. So we're using interactive tools. Thank you so much, Sanjak. And we would require that whenever we're asking you to be interactive, please feel free. We're not judgmental. Thank you so much, Shahanon. This is very important. If you are here, we are here to learn. There is no know-it-all person. We all need to learn from each other. You may know something from your context, but want to know it from the Myanmar context, right? So we need to be attentive. Thank you so much, Charlotte. We need to be participating in group work, and we need to respect everyone's view. Very good, Fozia. I really appreciate that you are picking the, okay? Yes, don't speak longer than others. We'll come to that. Very good, Cameron. So let's be patient. Let's be attentive. Let's listen to each other, and let's be confidential and sensitive. Very important. This is a field that is really sensitive. We know this because this is where we work all, and some content, some sharing can be very sensitive. So let's be a cohort that is united. Whatever we share here, it's for our information, but it's not for disclosure, for harming any person. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Great insights here. So you can go in the chat and read what your colleagues said, but here, this is what my colleagues, I'm just admitting in some people coming in, my colleagues and I, looking at what other cohorts have said, we collected a few. And please, if something was said as and it's not here, we'll add it, okay? Just this is important that you all noted it. So we would like to add that for you to be able to follow, share, and learn with each other, we need you to be joining, if possible, from a space that allows you to participate actively. We talked about participation. So if you're joining from a marketplace or a noisy space, you won't be able to follow, you won't be able to allow others to learn with you. So your videos, we know there is an issue with data, but your videos, if possible, should be on as we learn. So we get to put the faces to the names so we know each other. And if we met somewhere, we know we've been in the same cohort, okay? But your microphone can be muted. So if you want to mark your presence and be with us, your video can be on every time, but the microphone, if you're not speaking, put it off. Yeah, so let's really make good benefit of our diversity. We're joining from all parts of the world. Like I told you, from Africa, Europe, Asia, Asia Pacific, South America. So let's understand that we are all diverse and we have values, different values, and whatever someone shares, let's take it from their own context and not be judgmental, like some people said. Let's be open to learning, okay? So you may have read something, and if someone says something and you feel like this is not, it doesn't relate to what you already know, be open. Make follow-up, ask questions to the person. We have our our discussion board, follow up and learn from that individual, okay? So respond to others respectfully. Everyone would like to be respected. So let's give what we would like to receive from others, okay? So someone talked about not speaking longer than you should. So here we just called it step up, step back, all right? So we know we come in here from different levels of knowledge. So please, if you feel like this topic, you know most of it, give other people who may need to know more and ask questions, let them speak, and then step a little bit back and hear from everyone, okay? Consider your participation, but other people's participation. You need to know that, yes, I share for the sake of each other to learn, but also I need to know when to stop and let other people speak their minds as well, okay? Step up, step back. Thank you so much. There's nothing new, I think, like you've all said this. So very quickly, before I run out of time. Next slide, please, Manon. We're still talking about the course overview, and this we'll talk again about it when we send you for the breakout groups. So breakout groups are very important because that is where you as participants and as co-facilitators, we come into smaller groups to go into the nitty-gritties of an idea that we want to discuss about, a concept that we want to discuss about. So they are very important because they are part of the learning, all right? We learn from each other. It's not just here for me, Benita, and my colleague to come and say, this is what we know, and you taking it as Bible verses. But it's the opportunity to go in the groups and discuss and have a better understanding of the subject matter, right? So for this to work, you can see that we've got some different roles. So let's maximize the use of that time we given to go into the breakout groups, okay? We need you to make sure that you discuss, and to do it efficiently, you need someone to keep the time. If we say it's 10 minutes and you have 2 questions, don't spend all the minutes on 1 question. So you'll need a timekeeper, you will need someone to record the answers that you are putting, because most of the time we do come back and share with the whole group. So make sure that you have someone who will be the reporter. It may be the note taker or not, but someone to speak back to what you were assigned to do as a group. Okay, so these roles, it's important that when you are sent in a discussion as a group, you keep these roles. I mean, and you choose who's gonna take which role, and you make sure that the most important thing you discuss. Make sure that you share openly. Okay, I will add that on our requirements. Share openly. There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong discussion point. Everybody has got right to share their ideas, okay? So make sure that you have these people and make good use of the time. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to talk about before we send you to a group, this is a practice actually. So we want to get to know each other better. So in the next 12 minutes, I know you've mentioned your names and we know from the beautiful card where you are. We want to try and have this group work. The first group work is easy, like get to know each other better. We want you to go, we want to send you in a few groups. We could have 5 groups or 6, Manon. Yeah, let's have 5 or 6 groups where you go into different groups and you introduce each other, I mean, yourself to each other. So what we want to do is, as you introduce yourself, it's up to the person who's going to be managing your group or the person who is leading the discussion in your group. Introduce yourself very briefly like we did. And as you introduce yourself, the note taker or whoever is going to be the rapporteur will pick at least 3 things that they found are common to members of the group, okay? And we would like that as you do that, you find also things that are individual, like what is that thing that you find unique about an individual in your group? Okay, something that they shared that is individual. There is a link. Did someone put the link? Okay, so Manon, are we ready with the group? I'm going to send this link again. Okay, yes, someone sent it, and I am also resending it, and we'll also send again the attendance for those who are joining us. Okay. All right.
So we are ready for the breakout groups. I'm going to open the room right now.
Just a second, Manon.
Yeah.
Is that clear? Is everyone clear what you're going to do in the group? You're going just to get to know each other better. So introduce yourself. Like you take like 2 minutes to get, who's going to take which role. And then in 5 minutes, 1 minute per person, introduce yourself. And as you've introduced yourself, you find what are those 3 things that you found common to everyone in the group. And then what is that thing that is unique from different members of your group? Okay. All right. Clear?
And just to quickly add on, we have like pasted a link to the group work slides in the chat. I can already see that some of you are there already, but if you haven't found it, please click on that link, go to your, find your slide. Your slide is the same slide as your group number, and then whatever comes out of the group discussion, please add it there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benita. So make sure before you leave the main room, you've clicked on the link, and then you can join the room and introduce yourself. Okay. Enjoy the introductions. See you in resume with recording as we welcome everyone back from the breakout room. I hope you got time to introduce yourself to each other, learn from each other, and discover your points of commonalities and your particularities, which is important. Like we said, we are all diverse and we should use our diversity for a learning opportunity. Okay. So great. Yes, this was awesome. In a group, we had time to chat with colleagues who stayed in the main room. And this was a practice. So we're not going to report back. We usually, for the next sessions, we'll be reporting back our discussions from the group, the breakout groups. But today, it was just for the sake of introduction. All I can do is to encourage people to keep checking from the links that you have to know who else is in this group learning with you. Okay? Yeah. So thank you so much. I hope you got enough time to introduce yourself. And without any further ado, for the interest of time, I'll hand over to my colleague, Benita, to give us the main session of the day. Thank you so much. Over to you, Benita.
All right. So thank you, Rita. For our first session today, as Rita briefly mentioned earlier, we will take a closer look at the nature of violence against women. And I will try to speak slowly as per the request from some of our participants, but do let me know if you still have difficulty to follow me, okay? Let's get started with our learning objectives for the day. Next slide, Mano. So this is what we hope to achieve by the end of the session today. First, you will be able to understand the nature of VAW, including its patterns across the life course of women and girls. We will also look at the different types of data and learn about its difference and when to use what type of data and for what purpose. And then we will have some time to reflect on the data that might be available in your context and how you might have been using it, okay? And before I get into more details, next slide, Mano. I would like to start with a question for you, right? So please tell me, what do you call violence that women experience in your context? please type in your responses to the chat. You know, when we talk about violence that women experience, we know that there are different terminologies that we use, right? Or we define it in a different way. So my question is, what terminology do you use to refer to violence against women in your country? Or it could be in your program or in your organization or in your context. What do you call it? Yes, domestic violence, gender-based violence, what else? Femicide, okay. Anything else? Intimate partner violence, right? GBV, domestic violence. Okay, I think we all have it here, right? Thank you so much for sharing. So as we can see here also in the chat, we all use different terms in different contexts and for different reasons, right? And we also use acronyms all the time, which sometimes makes it confusing for some of us. That's why to start with, I have some of the most common terminologies here in the screen. And we thought, like, before we get started on other discussion, it would be helpful to be clear on some of the overlaps and distinction between these terminologies. So we can be clear about why we are using these certain terms, or be more clear on like what term to use in what kind of space. Okay, so Manon. Starting with gender-based violence. It is the broadest term. In the beginning, it was coined to emphasize that violence against women is a form of a systemic gender oppression. And this reinforces the idea that gender inequality is a driver of violence. Also, more recently, this term has been broadened to refer to any act of violence perpetrated on the basis of one's gender, right? So to also include issues like, let's say, forced recruitment of men and boys into armed groups, or violence that happens against sexual minorities. And these days, we see that this term, gender-based violence, is very commonly used in the humanitarian sector. Next, as many of you also mentioned in the chat, we also call it violence against women, VAW. When we talk about VAW, we refer to any form of violence that is against women and girls. It could be perpetrated either by a partner or a stranger. Many women rights groups use this term, violence against women, exclusively to keep the focus centered on women and girls, given that gender-based violence often has broader implications, as we discussed just now, right? So using this terminology, VAW, violence against women, it helps us to zero into the issue when we discuss the violence against women and girls. And then, as you all also mentioned, we also use the term domestic violence, or DV. It is commonly used like within police or as a lay term for intimate partner violence. But in certain contexts, it has also become broader, and it refers to violence within the family, not necessarily perpetrated by an intimate partner, right? So it can be violence within the family, like maybe parents perpetrating violence against children, or it can also refer to abuse of an elderly within a family. That is domestic violence. And the last term we have here is intimate partner violence, or IPV. This is also very commonly used terminologies these days to indicate a type of violence perpetrated by intimate partners. So it can be in a marriage or cohabitating couples, or in a dating relationship. So any kind of intimate relationship, all right? And here, I would also like to mention that at the Prevention Collaborative, and as part of this course, you will note that we will mostly use the terminology violence against women, VAW, and intimate partner violence, IPV. This is because we would like to be as specific and as clear as possible about the types of violence that we are referring to during our discussion. Okay, so to move on, let's start a quick look at how do women and girls experience violence. Next slide, Mano. We all know that women experience various types of violence throughout their lives. right? And this happens in all the countries in the world. So if we refer to the 2018 Global Violence Against Women Prevalence Estimates, it shows that on average, 31% of women of age 15 to 49 had experienced physical or sexual intimate partner violence or sexual violence from an acquaintance or stranger or both in their lifetime. And that is why, we find it useful to look at these different forms of violence through a life cycle approach or lifetime of a woman. And here you will note that as girls mature, they face different risks, and their experiences of violence are often gendered. Let us look at how. Okay, so the first bullet that we have here is pre-birth. I think that was Bello. I request that you mute yourself if you're not speaking. Thank you. I was talking about pre-birth. So violence against women and girls, it starts even before the birth in the form of sex-selective abortion, right? And as an infant, a girl may experience female infanticide. As a child, she may experience maltreatment, sexual abuse, or she might experience some practices such as female genital mutilation or cutting or forced marriage, right? And when a girl matures into an adolescence, she may start to experience IPV, whether in a dating relationship or a marriage. As an adolescent, also, she may experience FGM in some context or forced marriage and is at risk of sex trafficking. As an adult, particularly once married, a woman may experience IPV. If she is working, she may face workplace sexual harassment as well. And when a woman grows older, depending on the context where she is, she may experience specific abuse as an older woman because she is unmarried or because she is widowed. In some settings, this may also include accusations of witchcraft. So while some of these examples are common to more contexts, we know that the types of violence against women also vary by context and by population. For example, if we talk about honor killings, right, we know that it happens in certain parts of the world, and while it is not practiced in other parts of population. So context-specific violence. This is why when we work on violence against women programs, it is important to understand the specific types of violence and harmful practices in the specific context and among the specific population that we are working with. So if we are able to target our intended population well, because if we fail to do this, then our VAW prevention programming may not be as effective as we would like it to be. Okay. To move on, let's talk about the overlapping forms of violence, because we just talked about targeted programming, right? So for this, it is also important for us to understand different forms of violence for us to be able to design and implement our programs effectively. Globally, if we look at the available data, the most common form of VAW includes sexual and physical intimate partner violence, and non-partner sexual violence, which also includes rape and sexual harassment, and emotional or psychological abuse. Some women may suffer multiple forms of abuse at the same time or at different stages of their life, as you also saw in the previous slide, right? This especially occurs in IPV, where physical, sexual, emotional violence often overlap. So the Venn diagram that you see here, it is from the WHO multi-country studies on women's health and domestic violence against women. This was done among 24,000 women in 10 countries. And here you can clearly see the overlap between the types of violence, between physical IPV, sexual IPV, sexual abuse of children before 15, and sexual abuse since the age of 15 by someone other than an intimate partner. And here the overlap, particularly between physical and sexual IPV, is very clear, right? So this is what we're talking about. And so these evidences and findings, right, it brings us to this new question, like, how do we know what we know about violence against women? And for this, we need to first understand how reporting of violence happens at the community level, right? So let me first try to get to that. What we know is most women who experience violence do not disclose it to anyone. We all have experienced that, right? So in the slide that you see, the group of women who are experiencing violence but not disclosing it is represented by the iceberg below the surface of the ocean. The white part under the surface of our ocean that we have in the slide, okay? And next step, when women do disclose their experience of violence, it is most often to their friends and families. We all know this also, right? And in more serious cases, they may seek help from people around them at the community level, such as their trusted community leaders, or in some contexts, it could be faith leaders. And most of the times, like what we have to remember is this will also go unreported. So a very small proportion of women report their cases to formal sources, to specialized agencies, or to police, NGOs, CBOs, or other service providers at the community level. In most countries, the proportion of women who report cases to formal sources is only between 12 to 14% of women among all those who experience violence. And these women who report to formal sources generally represent a more severe group within all victims or survivors, since most of the time, as we discussed, they choose to seek help either from their friends or families or keep quiet, right? And unless they decide, like, it's very severe and risky enough for them, they do not report it to a formal source. So in the next slide here, I would like you to look at the implications of different types of reported cases or data that we have in our context. The number of cases at the tip of the iceberg, we call it administrative data. Administrative data is the information that we know based on the number of cases that were formally reported to the police, service providers, or other agencies. And we have to understand that such administrative data is not a reliable indicator of actual violence, because we have already discussed how majority of women in the community tend not to report violence to the formal sources, right? So what we have in these type of administrative data is reported by a very small percentage of women out of all women experiencing violence in our community, right? So this is a very, very small percentage. And the other type of data is called prevalence data. Prevalence data is the data collected from a nationally or geographically representative population survey, right? And it gives a measure of a proportion of women. For example, let's say women of age 15 to 49 or 18 to 49, right? In the whole population who disclose their experience of specific forms of violence for women who may not otherwise disclose violence in their life. And this is why this type of data, prevalence data, is more closer to showing the true level of problem in a specific context. However, we still need to understand that even in these type of prevalence data, like we still miss a group of women, a subset of women who are not comfortable disclosing violence in any survey to anyone, right? And in this diagram that I have on the screen, like we see this group of women is represented by the deepest part of the iceberg below the dotted line, right? So even with the prevalence data, we are still missing some percentage of women experiencing violence, as violence is underreported across different data sources. But this prevalence data still gives us a closer indicator of violence, and it is a more reliable compared to the administrative data. Okay. To move on, I would like to now focus a bit more on IPV, right? Next slide, Mano. But before I move further on, like, let me ask you, like, how do you define IPV in your context? Like, what do you understand when we say IPV or intimate partner violence? It could be in your context, it could be in your organization, like, you know, whatever you understand when we say IPV. Could you share your responses in the chat? Yes, thank you, Riza. How do you define IPV? Anyone? Okay, violence between sexual partners perpetrated by husband, by someone you are intimately involved in, can be when people are in a relationship or after they have broken. Yes, ex-partner also, by someone's spouse, violence between partners. Okay, so I see that it's kind of like, you know, clear to most of us here, right? So let me give you our definition of IPV. The way we understand and explain it at the collaborative is intimate partner violence is those behaviors of an intimate partner or ex-partner, as you just mentioned, that cause sexual, physical, or psychological harm, including physical aggression, sexual coercion, psychological abuse, and controlling behavior. Okay, so intimate partner violence can occur amongst cohabitating and non-cohabitating intimate partners as well. And often physical, sexual, and emotional abuse co-occur in this form of violence. So some other terms that is used to describe IPV includes, as I also mentioned earlier, domestic violence, spousal abuse, wife beating, dating violence. Like, you know, these are all IPV. And IPV is a pattern of abusive behavior over time, right? So it is more like a spectrum, and which occurs as a result of habitual patterns of interaction, which lead to a moment when a person exerts their okay.
I don't need.
Let me mute you, Pam. Okay, going back to what I was saying. So intimate partner violence, right? So it often occurs as a result of an interaction which leads to a moment when a person exerts his power through one or more forms of violence against his partner. Here, I would also like to mention that much of the research that we have on IPV, it focuses on heterosexual relationships. But then we also know that this happens, this also applies to other type of relationships, right? For example, same-sex relationship. But then, as I said, the evidence that we have till date on IPV is mostly derived from the heterosexual relationship. So now you must have started thinking, why are we focusing so much on IPV, right? So if we go to next slide, Manon. So it is because, as I just mentioned, IPV is the best understood form of violence against women. Because for us to have any kind of evidence, there needs to be investment in the research and various studies, right, which focuses on that form of violence. And so far, this is where more investment has been done globally because IPV is the most common form of violence. And the studies that we have listed here, like WHO multi-country study, it was a very, very comprehensive study done in 2005. And nowadays, there are also lots of national level prevalence surveys. And we also have a DHS, demographic health surveys for different countries that also includes IPV. Okay. To move on, Manon. Now that we're looking at the global data for IPV, we need to understand that the situation might vary the situation of violence prevalence, right? It might vary based on the specific country context as well, right? So while having global data is useful, like, we also need to be like looking at the specific countries where we are working. For example, this graph that I have here shows prevalence data of physical or sexual intimate partner violence in the past 12 months. And here we can see significant differences between average level of violence between different settings, different countries, right? If you look at the Ethiopia province, 53.7% of women reported being physically or sexually abused by an intimate partner in the past 12 months. But then, like, if you compare it with the Japanese city Yokohama, like the violence rate is 3.7 and also 3.8 in Serbia city, right? This is very similar to the differences that you see between higher income and lower income countries. For example, in Australia, the United States, and Canada, around 3% of women in any year are physically, sexually abused by intimate partner violence. But in many parts of the world, like, level of IPV are an order of magnitude higher. So while some of this variation may reflect cultural differences in women's comfort, right? Some women in some contexts, they like to openly discuss or report violence. In some contexts, they don't like to. So this variation might also be because of those cultural differences. But then I also have to mention that, like, this study that I am referring to, it went to enormous length to use similar methods across different settings to encourage disclosure of violence. So we can see that the differences are too large and to solely attribute it to the measurement difference. Okay. And one more thing, while we are talking about the variation, next slide, Mano. So we need to understand that while war rates vary between different countries, we can also see the variation within the same country as well, okay? And it is highlighted through this data from Afghanistan that you see on your screen. This data demonstrates how the rates of violence against women vary widely between different regions of the same country. The map uses data from 2015 DHS survey in Afghanistan to show the percentage of ever married women of age 15 to 49 who have experienced physical, sexual, or emotional violence from their intimate partner in the past 12 months. Okay, and this varies between the lowest prevalence of 6% in Helmand, if you can see, to the very high prevalence of up to 92% in Herat or in Kandahar, right? So the variation from 6% to 92% is such a high, like, wide variation, and this is within the same country. So this shows how levels of intimate partner violence vary very much within the countries as between countries. And the variation in levels of IPV from country to country, region to region, and community to community is important, because these data, like, it shows us that IPV is not inevitable, even in a context with very, very high prevalence rates, right? So it kind of really prompts us to think about, like, these data and these numbers that we saw, like, why are the levels of violence is so low in some settings, and why is it so much higher in a context that is not so far away, right, within the same country as we saw. And also, like, we should start thinking about what can we learn from this to design programs to help us bring down the level of violence everywhere. We should be asking these questions ourselves, like, when we are designing programs and activities for our context to prevent war. Because understanding these differences and the reasons for these differences, it can really help us to come up with solutions and direct our war prevention efforts more effectively. Okay, so I feel like that was quite a lot. that I just covered. So I would like to pause here and see if you have any thoughts, any questions, any comments.
Thank you,
I'm
Benita.
sure all of you are still there because I see very quiet in the chat room.
Yes, they're there, and some active discussions in the chat, and people agreeing with what you're saying and even adding on what you were saying, Benita. Very
Okay.
engaged discussion.
Okay. Yeah. I did not look at the chat when I
That's
was
fine.
talking.
That's fine.
Yeah, but I see that you were responding. So thank you so much. And this is just our first session today, right? And we will keep this discussion ongoing. So maybe, like, in the interest of time for now, I'll hand it over to you, Rita.
Great. And yeah, thank you so much, Benita. And thanks everyone who kept the engagement in the chat. And for those who kept their cameras on, I could see Charlotte and other people nodding to what Benita is saying. It's really encouraging when you're talking to people, yeah, in the absence of a physical space. Let's make this virtual space as interactive as possible. So thanks for the questions, the responses, and also the reflections. So Benita, whatever you were sharing, people were agreeing, and they were also commenting and starting to share from their context. Okay. So like we said, we need to give people time to reflect, to sink in this information, if it's new, or even if it's not new, just try to, to think again, how am I using this? Is it something that I see in my work? And for that, we would like to give you 5 minutes, like individual reflection time. We always know that it's good to have time to reflect, and make some notes before we open up for some other group discussion. And we want you to use the 5 minutes to identify what are those common forms of violence against women in your context that you see in your context. You have put in the chat, and you, at the beginning of the session, you identify what you called violence and what are the types of violence, as Benita was explaining. So take time and just put down that, and how it, if at all you have that type of violence, how does that violence vary by setting or population? I can already see what Dickens was saying in the chat, that it can vary, depending to the community, the different, space. So continue that reflection. And what sources of data are you aware of in your context, for your context of work, for where you live? And I know Benita explained clearly the difference between administrative data and prevalence data. So what are those sources of data that you are aware of? Just naming those, okay? So as we are asking Manon to give us like a little bit of music to help us, breathe a bit. This was an intensive kind of session. So take those 5 minutes, write down those 3 reflection questions. I can also add those questions in the chat for you. And a reporter, if that is okay. So we're going to open the groups, and
can we first have the link to the breakout slide?
Of course, yes.
Manon?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have it. I can't share the link and the screen at the same time, as I said.
Hold on, let me try and do it then.
Hold on a bit before you send colleagues, Manon.
And I think like some of us were like, some of you, you were confused earlier about which groups you are in or which slide you should be working on. So whatever your group number is, you should pick that slide to take notes, and you can access to the slides here. Can you click on that slide and see if you can access it? I already see some of you there, so yes. And from the slide 4 onwards, you will see different slides for different group numbers and one slide for each question, right? So once you have assigned roles among yourself and you start discussing, the note taker can start taking notes here, and you can use the same slides for sharing later after the group work.
Great. Thank you so much. I was seeing already Shaba writing. If you want to write the names, you can write on top of that where it is mentioned.
So the name should be matching. Room 1 is group 1, room 2 is group 2, just like to clear.
Okay. So
Vinita.
So we thank you again for staying longer, because as we said, session 1 will take longer than the remaining sessions. So we will give each group 3 minutes to just take us through what you discussed. You don't need to go into details. And if Manon can display the slides, we'll start with group 1. And then if you have a rapporteur who can take us through that, that will be amazing. So group 1, over to you if you you are ready. We are all in the loop, so yeah. Thank you, Manon. Group 1, over to you. Cyprian and group, anyone to take us through?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. We did discuss, and we say Tabile would be happy to present, or Hasna, either Hasna is happy to present, but if they are busy, I'm happy to facilitate our discussion.
Thank you.
We discussed and said its context, as I'm from Timor-Leste, and my colleagues, they are from different countries in Middle East and also in Africa. We said that forms of violence against women are seen across all countries. Is the emotional violence, where young women mostly living under oppressions because of they are bullied, and also bullied in the public area, and also in the workplace, at the school, in the family itself. Physical violence, slapping, beating, kicking, which also considered as domestic violence, and it happened. This is what common violence we said amongst our team, as sexual abuse in the family, and IPV, or intimate partner, denial of resources, online and digital violence, or we could say cyberbullying against women and girls, which is now considering happening a lot in every country almost. So this issue we said amongst one another, and we said that it's almost happening in every country. We also said that some issues in terms of its perspective of its country. In Timor-Leste, I was sharing about how patriarchy system has caused many young women living in the violence, in the hard situation. They face violence from their intimate partner or husband, from their brothers or from their father, and that's how patriarchy system, and even education, they face problem because their parents say, oh, because you are going to marry a man and you're gonna leave us, so you can take master degree instead of a son or a man in the family. That's a patriarchy system has caused many young women face problems and violence in our country. Hasna and Tabile, they also said in the discussion that in their country as well, most of the women still dependent to the perpetrators, even they are kicked or they face problems, but it's still population that still the less privileged population. I think that's what we said amongst us.
Thank you so much, Cipriano. Anyone from group 1 to add? Nabile?
Yeah, please.
Anyone? Is there anything he omitted? Great.
So, hi colleagues. So maybe to add on the online and cyberbullying violence. So this colleague highlighted that some of the people or women are not allowed to freely express themselves due to their sexuality. They are still being discriminated or violated because of their sexuality. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, we see a lot of that type of violence, people who are discriminated, and maybe later on we will understand the causes. We'll get to that, the different causes of violence, right? Thank you. And yeah, can we proceed and listen to group 2? And maybe group 1, if you have time, please do tell more about the sources of the data that you have. I guess it's because of time you didn't get opportunity to go through all of that. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. Group 2, Maria, Krishna, anyone to report back? Do we have a rapporteur for? Okay. Anjali. Thank you.
Maria, do you want to take it?
No, please, Anjali, please go. Thank you.
I would request to my group add on if I miss something. I would like to take you all what we have discussed in our group. In terms of forms of violences against women across our known countries, these are the list of violence we commonly seen in our country. Most of the in our group, the 5 people, around 5 to 6 people have said majorly we have seen sexual violence against women in our country. Next one was emotional and psychological violence that has majorly seen in our country. Physical violence, economical violence, harmful cultural practices, marriage and gender-based violence. These are the commonly seen violences, forms of violences across the country we know. Can you go to second slide of group number 2? Thanks. In terms of the context and the intensity of violence according to context and the population setting of population, we discussed around these sexual and physical violence across the countries we know, and what we have seen majorly is how these practices or how these violences are embedded from the childhood, especially in terms of women while growing up, and how these practices are harmful in terms of context in different countries. Plus, second point is about India, in terms of India, what I have seen and I have experienced in India, I felt it is more emotional and yes, there are sexual and physical violences, but major violence I have seen is psychological and emotional, and how it grows from from the childhood. It sums how we grown up, the environment we get, and the behavior which uh, the behavior expected from the women and girls to do's and don't in terms of these things. And this comes with the tags like our culture, our tradition, and the role in terms of gender role, the role which girls has to play, women has to play, and the men and um, the other gender has to play with the roles. And it also with the in terms of the context, in I have seen the different violences in different contexts in terms of rural and urban. In urban contexts, there are awareness, there are education, so they can raise and stand for what they want. Little bit more than rural. It's very difficult for rural population to even recognize this is something different. It is very normalized things, so they don't even feel that this is something wrong with them. So that's what we were able to discuss in our group. Can you please go to third slide of, yeah, these are some of data we have known, our government data, policy reports, and there are UN agencies report, and there are Uganda say UHS data, policy is data. From Kenya, there are data from Ministry of Gender and Human Rights report. These are just we known the data, we know the sources where from we have the information. And from Nigeria, there are data from government ministries, the police, the justice, and NGOs. Yeah, that's it. Please feel free to add people, Maria, Krishna, Isabel, and I guess
Thank you
there
so
is
much. Thank you so much, Angeline, too. And this was such a great report back. And if
Yeah.
you have something to add, Dickens, a few seconds to add. Yeah.
Yeah, just a small one. Thank you for the presentation. Very clear. On marriages, somebody had questioned and said marriage is not a form of violence, but I think in the Ugandan context, you'll find that there are so many forced marriages.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went ahead and
Younger.
Yeah.
And
that's a form of violence.
Because quite a number of girls were forced to marriages, after COVID-19. Many of them were, became pregnant, and they were forced to
absolutely
the home of the boy or the man who made her pregnant. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dickens, for clarifying. And we did edit the slide. And I really want to thank Group 2 for how they unpacked everything and were able to even go deeper and make the difference between the forms of violence that can be context related, and they linked it to the harmful social cultural norms. That was very important and insightful. Thank you so much. For the interest of time, let's go to Group 3 and hear what they have to share with us. 3 minutes for Group 3. Thank you. Anyone to take us through? The rapporteur? Do we have someone from Group 3? Charlotte?
Okay, I'll go.
Sorry to put you on.
Am I audible enough?
Very clear, yeah.
All right, so from our countries in Group 3, we have identified forms of violence as IPV, the indigenous women are facing violence, being segregated, the physical, social, economical, cultural, and psychological violences, and violence against people with disabilities, and cyber harassment, including revenge porn, and spiritual violence, and violence related to migration and migration visas. Next slide, please. So what forms of violence are seen in our countries is the female genital mutilation is not visible in Bangladesh. However, as this is more about cultural as well as country context, as these forms are not that much prevalent, and also violence against transgender and LGBTIQ are mostly not addressed due to socio-cultural reservation, and same-sex based gender violences are also unheard. And in East Africa, context of FGM is different than Oceania or Oceania and other parts of Asia as well as the rest of Africa. And in Australia, so Australia is a secular colonial state. So there is an ongoing violence towards indigenous women here that is more prevalent and more severe than what other women experience. So there is violence also state sanctioned, which with indigenous women and children being imprisoned at extremely high rates, and children are taken from indigenous women. Indigenous people do not have land rights or access to traditional land here, and the list goes on. And in South Africa, we have, there is no distinguishing between who is getting less or who is getting more violence, because even if you are rich, you are poor, you are in the rural area, you're in the urban area, we all experience violence somehow. And yeah, we cannot say it is, okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. We cannot say that, well, it is not considered as violence because it occurs in different regions. And what sources do we have? We have prevalent data, mostly as administrative part is a bit complex, and administrative data requires a lot of scrutiny because they said it's like, you need to deep dive, like you need a deeper dive so that you can get the credible results. And there are also NGOs like Kwela, POA, and Tutuzela Care Centers. And we have a national personal security survey in Australia, sorry about that, and a national community attitude survey, which measures how much or how little sexist and gender inequalities ideas are changing or not over time. And my team members will add if we still have time. If you have any questions, you can also ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a great reporting back. Really starting to get the idea about how across the geographies, across communities, we see violence. And I like the way you put the nuances, like the different types of violence that you see in different countries. But here I'm picking one thing: violence has no limit. It happens to everyone. It happens anywhere. So yeah, making a good reason to why we need to fight violence. Anyone to add from that group? But this was clear. Thank you so much. Group 3. Yeah. Okay, so can we do quickly group 4? Thank you so much. Nay, Susmita, anyone to represent the group? Alfred, Nancy.
Okay, thank you, Rita. I represent my group, group 4. So we are a team from different countries: Uganda, Kenya, India, and then Nigeria. So looking at the different forms of violence against women seen across our countries, we noted like that we have forms of violence that across our countries. We have physical violence, emotional violence. We also have economic violence and sexual violence, which is widespread. And specifically for India, and some of this violence happen in both the private and also public spaces. And also, I think I'm also pulling out Kenya, where also boys face a lot of sexual violence, and and according to Lily, and that is always reported, unlike other countries where like still violence against boys does not come out clearly in terms of reporting, but also if you want to look at the data is not collected by the service providers. Next slide, please. So what sources of violence against women data are we aware of in our different contexts? We also noted that across countries, there are national systems that where the different providers report data on violence against women. Like for example, in India, they have the DHS, which is a national system for reporting. And however, there's no acknowledged data source for violence in India. When you look at Kenya, Uganda, we have the hospital or health center records, we have the police records. We also have the data from judiciary. We also have the GVB shelters, for example, in Uganda, where GVB shelters have been established. We are also able to pick this data, and also the district action center. These are mainly the violence response mechanism that are set across country districts in Uganda, where we really want to, who is interested in getting data regarding violence, and easily walk to these centers. We also have the national systems like the so have national agreement get system. In Nigeria are still the same about the we trade the prevalence the surveys on violence that is conducted across our different countries. Next slide, please.
I think that was all for your group, Alfred. And thank you so much for reporting back. And we could hear that you were breaking towards the end, but your presentation was very clear. And I picked the point about the lack of some data collection mechanism in some context. And we know that there is gap in data collection, right, and sharing. So from your presentation, I was able to see that you're making a clear difference between the types of data, like Benita presented, administrative versus prevalence data. That is important. And yeah, that's one thing I wanted to flag. Thank you for your presentation. I am really cautious about time, and I wanted to offer the 3 next minutes to group 5 to take us quickly through their presentation. Anyone to represent your group? Suman? Thank you so much for presenting group 4. Group 5? Rita? Okay, so no one to present for group 5?
No. We can present. Actually, one of our colleague wanted to present, but I can go for it.
Please do. Thank you, Sean.
So yes, there must be some typo in the box. So what we were countries from Kenya, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And we first discussed about the different forms of violence against women data that we are aware of our context. So in Kenya, we discussed that there are prevalence of physical violence, wife inheritance, child marriage, forced marriage, and in different decision-making platforms, women voices are missing. So we also consider these form of violence. And then in Nepal, we have physical violence, sexual violence, child marriage, trafficking in person, controlling behavior, especially in the cases where gender roles are not met by the women. And in Bangladesh, we discussed that we have experienced like physical, psychological, sexual violence. We have different forms of controlling behaviors towards women and girls. We have child marriage, which is also very prevalent. We have trafficking in person, especially when we have our world's largest refugee context in Bangladesh, like Rohingya refugees. So trafficking is also a growing issue or concern. And particularly in the hill tracts where mostly indigenous and tribal population live, there is economic violence. So these are the main forms of violence that we discussed. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Our population within these countries. So in Kenya, we found that FGM, wife inheritance, child marriage, wife battering, elderly abuse, and violence against person with disabilities experience more violence, and there are traditional harmful practices. And in Nairobi, Kenya, it's found that more in the informal settlements compared to the middle class, they have experienced more violence. And in Nepal, there is one particular issue like violence during menstrual period, which is in the form of controlling behavior. It's found in the western part of Nepal. And in Bangladesh, we found that prevalence of violence is higher in the rural parts than urban, definitely for different causes, like urban population have more literacy rate, more economic freedom, and etc. And we discussed that in most of the countries, like COVID-19 period or the lockdown period caused increase of violence experienced by women and girls. And we discussed that prevalence varies between rural and urban areas in all three countries. Next slide, please. And what are the sources of data on violence against women? So in Bangladesh, we have Bangladesh Demographic Health Survey reports. We have Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics report. We conducted a nationwide survey particularly on violence against women and girls. We have data sources from police stations, women help desk in police stations, different NGOs that provide services for the survivors of violence. We have data from them. We have health service providers data. We have one-stop crisis center or cell, media reports, and the Ministry of Women and Children, they provide data on violence against women and girls. And in Kenya, these are the reports from community leaders, referrals. From referrals, we get the data on violence against women. We have data from police, gender desk, and government managed free calls, toll-free calls that also give data on violence against women. However, the data is not harmonized particularly in the context of Kenya. In Nepal, they have DHS data. We also have Ministry of Women and Population, one-stop health centers, and Ministry of Women, Children, and Senior Citizens who provide data on violence against women. So this is so far we discussed in our group. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Ano. I wish we had more time to discuss about all these. And one thing that surprised me was the wife inheritance. And this again brings us to knowing that in different contexts, different cultures, there can be particular forms of violence, but it all goes back to the different categories we talked about, the forms of violence that we mentioned at the beginning. So keep the
Yes.
discussion going in the chat, please, colleagues, but I will just ask the final group to present so that everyone can get a chance. Thank you so much. Group 6, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Being the last group, I think it's my responsibility to also be the fastest. So essentially, I think we've already heard from individual countries. So our group had Kenya, Nigeria, and India. So we've already heard a lot of the stories, so I won't repeat myself. So there's as for question 1, we realized that pretty much all forms of violence about are seen in some shape of across all our geographies. There was an interesting point that was raised that we'll be covering in the next slide. So if you could just move ahead to the second slide. Yeah. So we want to talk about while there is violence in all that exists across all geographies. There were a few specific incidents that we wanted to talk about. So in India, for example, violence for dowry is very common, and dowry is something. So whenever a woman's married into a new family and they're expected to move from their family into the man's family, and they're expected to carry money and a lot of other goods along, and this is known as dowry. So this was a historic practice. Now it's largely not as legally permitted, but this is still very commonly practiced, and there's a lot of violence around this that is seen in our country, particularly in the northern parts of the country. In Kenya, our group discussed a very interesting phenomenon wherein around election time, there's a general uptick in violence across all categories, including violence against women. And this was something that we thought we should shed some light on. Yeah, could we move to the next slide? Yeah. In terms of data, we've already discussed where different countries source their data from. So typically, one is the administrative data, as we've covered, which is a lot of the national surveys. And then the other is more localized anecdotal data, for which you could depend on the local healthcare facilities or even like dedicated people at local police stations. And they provide localized data for agencies and individuals to work on. Yeah, thank you.
I realized I was on mute while speaking. Thank you so much for this quick but very concise report back. So this is important. It's amazing to look at all the nuances, all the differences, but again, bringing us back to the existence, the prevalence and the existence of violence in different settings. So I know this is a discussion that started, and we'll take time to go deeper into that through the take-home exercises, and we'll also have a look at it when we do our next session. So without any further delay, I'll let Benita talk to you about the take-home exercise that you have, and then we'll close. And thanks for your patience, for staying with us. Thank you. Over to you, Benita.
Thank you. So before I walk you through your first take-home assignment for today's session, let me quickly reinforce why working on these assignments are important. Okay, Manon. So yeah, it is because take-home exercises, assignments are also an important part of this course. It is designed in a way that helps you remember and recap the things that we discussed in today's session. So it is more like a continuation of the session itself, which you will do in your own time. And also this assignment will give you an opportunity to apply what we discussed today in your own context. Because as you have seen already, we have participants from all around the world in this course, and therefore our live sessions will include content that is relatable to everyone, right? But then the assignment component will give you an opportunity to reflect and apply it in your own programs and in your own context and see how it works. Okay. Also, as Rita already mentioned earlier, the submission of take-home exercises it will make you eligible for the course certificate at the end. And in terms of the language, we have our live sessions in English language, which will be the case for the take-home exercises as well. But we do understand that English is not our first language for many of us here. So while our request for you is to submit your assignments in English, please know that it is not a language test. So do not worry about grammars or if your sentence structure is correct. All you need to do is use a simple language and try to respond to the questions in your own language, because this is what we prioritize, reading your responses in your own language. And as long as we understand what you're trying to explain, it will be good enough. Okay. Next slide, Manon. So please also know that your assignments will be graded by our facilitators, and we will be categorizing them in 3 areas, as you can see on the slide, right? So when we will say your assignment do not meet our expectations, it means well, maybe you do not answer to the questions directly, because many times we get responses which is a long response, but then it doesn't respond to the question. And also when it is too short, when it's less than 250 words, or when you come up with the generic cases that is not specified to a context, then we can say that the assignment do not meet our expectations. Similarly, when we say your assignment meets our expectation, it means you wrote your assignment in your own words and you responded to the questions that we asked directly. And also you meet our word count limit of 250 words across all the questions, okay? And when your assignment meets our expectation, it will not be sent back to you. So if you submit your assignment and you do not hear back from us, then it is a good news that it met our expectation. If not, you will receive it back with our comments and feedback, so you can do it again and resubmit. Yeah. Finally, we will also mark the assignments which will exceed our expectation. So it will happen when your assignment will show a strong insight into the topic and its implications, and will appropriately cite evidence for the responses that you include. Yeah. So every week we will also select one of these assignments to present during the live session. Yeah, we will request you beforehand, and so you will know if your assignment is selected for the presentation in the next session. Okay, now let me walk you through the reflection questions for this week's take-home exercise. Okay, you will need to reflect on, first, the experience that you have of using data to inform your work. So what experience do you have, and what sources have you used, and how have you used it? Also, we ask that you choose at least one specific source of data on violence against women from your context, either from the suggested sources that you see on the slide, or it could be any other sources that you are aware of, right? And once you've selected it, then look at the data and then look at the prevalence, types of violence, perpetrators, consequences. Based on that, answer the following questions. How does the data compare with your experience in your work? And what gaps, if any, did you notice in the data? That was question number 2. And finally, think if this information changed the way you think about addressing violence against women in your context. If yes, how? Please give some specific examples. Usually it takes around 1 to 2 hours to complete this exercise, depending on the different levels of the person. But we really hope that these questions will inspire you to explore through some of the data from your own context and learn more from them. And once you're done with your assignment, please send it to our Learning Lab email that you can see in the slide here, learninglab@preventioncollaborative.org by Sunday, 19th February 2023, right? And other details on email, subject, etc. are on the slide that you can see. Also, you have mine and Rita's email addresses here on the slide too. So please feel free to reach out if anything is not clear or if you have additional questions. Okay. And then, yes, we will be sending out the handout from today's session, including the PowerPoint and other materials that you can use for reference. Also, it will be uploaded in the Learning Lab along with the recording of this session. Okay. So with this, we are at the end of the today's session. I see that we have already taken 7-8 more minutes than what we said. So I thank all of you for your participation today. We are really, really glad to have you here, and we hope it was a good session for all of you. We'll see you next week, same time, same day. And also, we hope to keep these interactions and discussions ongoing in the upcoming sessions as well. Goodbye for today.